Saturn in Aries transit is a time focused on personal sovereignty, committing to your goals, being very, very strategic about every goal that you have, and being the leader and being the CEO and the boss of your own life. The ability to run your own life the way that you want to live it, and to set long-term goals and do the things that you really, really want to do and make them reality. Making them reality for you is really, really important, and you can come into play here really, really strongly with this energy. Aries is a sign of me first, doing it first. I want to be the first. I want to be the one initiating everything. I want to be in charge. I want to be strong. I want to be powerful. But at worst, it can be ego and not just, I'm coming from a place of sovereignty. When we're ego, we are not in our sovereignty. We are, we're not authentic. We are reacting. We are, battling against, me and another person. You and another person. When we're in our egos, we can't really seem to find that connection there, and that respecting other people's truth in other people's lives when we get into our ego. So becoming aware of being in our ego is really what Saturn and Aries invites us to do. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different because I'm not going to deliver you a 12-sign horoscope video right after this, because I already did that back in March originally. So you can go check that out. I also have a video on my YouTube channel. It's 55 minutes long. I filmed it back in February before I started this podcast, so there's a lot of good information in there, and I want you to go back and see that if you would like to hear the information in that video. A lot of this information in that video will overlap with this one. I just thought, you know what? I just want to make it official. I want the two videos in this podcast. I want a video on Saturn and Aries, the collective look, in this podcast, and so that's what I'm doing. Yesterday's podcast, I was really, really insecure with myself, and the reason why is because I've been having issues with Spotify uploading these podcasts, because I upload on YouTube and Spotify. And the insecurity that kept coming up, that wouldn't be silenced, that wouldn't just sit down, I was sitting on this insecurity, is what if this episode doesn't get published? What if I go to all this time, and it was an anxious energy, I was anxious, I was in my head, I was, very, very, and I acknowledge that I was insecure in that episode. It was very, very, I couldn't be free to express myself fully, because I was just so afraid. That it wouldn't publish. So, earlier, and I want to address something that's really, really coming up right now, is May of this year, I had some issues with an ingestion problem with my content on Spotify, where I published one episode, and then another episode I didn't get published, and then they looked into it, and then they fixed it, and I could get my episodes published again. Not that may never happen again. They got the issue fixed, but if it should happen again, then I will notice after a while. If after a while I notice, some episodes are not getting published, and I need to get this fixed. But it shouldn't happen again. But if in the rare case that it does for any reason, then I'll notice and do it. So that's just what I want to leave it at that. Pluto retrograde, it's not letting me off the hook. This Pluto retrograde right now is really not letting me off the hook. It is really, really digging up some shadowy stuff, and it's really, really having me look at all the insecurities and all the shadowy stuff is coming up and I have to just address it, and I can't push it down, and I can't deny it. Otherwise I'm just gonna knock on the door louder until it's gonna, be the big bad wolf and burn the house, blow the whole house down. So integration, I have to be honest with myself, I have to deal with it. And this morning I just woke up with this realization that, what, back in March I was like, I made a point, I'm not going to go on Spotify and check and see if the episodes got published or not, because they've got published in the past. Back in March when I started this podcast on Spotify, when I started posting on Spotify, and they got published, I didn't need to check. And so, I don't want to be doing this with the anxiety of what if this doesn't publish. And, the whole thing is, when it comes to my creative hobby, creative passion, creative expression, I need to be absolutely, secure and as certain as I can be, because it's really, really going to get into my head and really, really affect me as I do these videos for me and for you. And wondering if that, the chance that it will, not get published, because what happened was the issue got fixed, and a couple days later I had an issue with an episode again. So it's been happening so much that I'm just like, I just cannot deal with it anymore, and I cannot deal with the anxiety of this happening anymore. So I can't deal with it anymore, because it's really, really messing with my inner peace when doing this, and I still want to post on Spotify. Because I trusted back in March that the episodes got published, and they did without me having to check, there is no reason why the episodes now in May or in June, some of them won't get published. Like, there's no reason for it. I should have had this issue from the get-go, not, I mean, you don't go along with a system, with posting episodes on a certain platform, and it works out really, really wonderfully, and then a problem happens. With the insecurity, where you feel so secure, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't work out. No. So, I'm not going to worry about what the future is going to hold, because I don't know. We never know what the future is going to hold. I don't know if I'm going to have the ingestion issue again. If I do, I'll notice it, and so be it. But I'm just going to... It's really, really hard to let these things go, because they just come up in my consciousness, and they just sit there and eat away at me and eat me up. It just... it's very, very hard for me to compartmentalize this stuff, and I just came to the realization this morning that, I am not going to, I'm not going to let the episodes get the better of me. It is not worth going to the trouble so that the episode gets published. If I have to contact an advisor, if I have to get them to, wait for them to give them the link to post a thing, like, it's not worth my time and energy and my anxiety of whether it's going to work out or not. It's not worth it to me at all to have that happen. So, I will continue to post on Spotify. And if an episode doesn't get published every once in a while, then it doesn't get published. So be it. The next episode will get published. I looked it up. The next episode will. So if you're following me on Spotify and you don't see an episode getting published, you can always go to my YouTube channel and you'll find that episode right there. I'm not going to monitor it. I'm not going to... Spotify's system is not as efficient, and we have to surrender to the fact that not everything in life can be certain or perfect, but you don't have to live in the anxiety and the insecurity and all of that kind of thing. You don't have to live in that reality. I don't have to live in that reality when I do these things. It's not worth my inner peace. So, when the episode gets published, it gets published. If it does, great. Most of the times it will. Occasionally there'll be one that doesn't get published. Others will. I'm not going to go to the trouble just for the sake of an episode getting published. I'm not going to obsess and worry over an episode getting published on my podcast and Spotify. So that's the very, very first thing I wanted to say. And the next thing is, authenticity really, really is, and this is a very, very Aries subject matter, is really, really about, and I'm so glad that I actually slept through my alarm clock that woke up very, very early this morning. Otherwise, I wouldn't have this realization and this insight about Spotify and about my decision for Spotify before doing this. So it was kind of, worked out that I did this, that I'm doing this at this time in this way. Then the other thing, and I think that when Pluto turns direct in October, it'll make it a heck of a lot easier to compartmentalize all this stuff and to be able to be present and to be able to not be in the shadows and in the unconscious mess of it all. Authenticity really is, I'm going to look at, maybe we're going to do a podcast on authenticity. It's being genuine, being your real self, true to your personality, true to who you are. Having your internal thoughts be with the external. So that's what authenticity is, according to AI. If you're wondering where did you get that, well, I just looked it up. Doesn't mean, somebody's authenticity can be assertive and strong and willing to put themselves out there and outspoken and all that. And others' authenticity can be quiet, introverted, calm, peaceful, slow down, soft, reflective. Don't be anyone with who you are. And authenticity isn't just a one-size-fits-all. I think that in my mind I have this unconscious belief that authenticity is just being assertive, putting yourself out there and, willing to shine or do whatever. Well, it's not, it can be that, but there's multiple forms of authenticity, and it's not a one, it's where somebody just being who they are. Not everybody is willing to put themselves out there and, be that way, and so they're being authentic to who they truly are themselves. And so, we want to honor that. Now, I'm freely allowed to express whatever thought on my channel, but as I grow and as I, evolve into an Aries person, as a human being, a soul being, a living human experience, I will understand these things. I will become very, very wise. And, authenticity has many, many different forms to it. One's version of authenticity can be very, very different than another's, so long as you're being real with that. So that is all that I have to say on authenticity. I think it's a very, very good segue to this video on the Saturn Aries transit. So this is the podcast version. If you want the video version, you can go on my YouTube channel for that. I highly recommend you check it out. I'm not going to take that down because I want to honor the integrity of what I did at the time. I just want to give you both on this podcast because I want to give myself both on this podcast. Somebody wanted me to do this and begged me to do this, and I didn't want to. I wouldn't do it for them. But I want to do this, so I'm doing it. So let's go over the dates. So Saturn first entered the sign of Aries back in 2025, last year. And it entered the sign back in May. So it entered Aries May 25th, stayed until September 1st. Went back into Pisces, retrograded, retrograde back into Pisces, went direct around about the 27th of November, somewhere around there. And then fully entered Aries this year at the time of filming that video, around that time, February 13th of this year. It's going to stay until April 12th of 2028. So we have a good chunk of time left of Saturn in Aries. And you can trust that I'll be doing Saturn in Taurus when 2028 comes, and I'll still be doing this podcast. And so, so the last time Saturn was in Aries was April 7th of 1996. So, the last time was, as I've said, to April 7th, 1996 to June 8th of 1998. Then it happened again between October 25th of 1998 through February 28th of 1999. So those are the previous transits. So, for those born during those dates, you're going through your Saturn return. Your first Saturn return. So Saturn is on your head asking you, conjunct your natal Saturn, asking you to grow, asking you to mature to the best version, most evolved version of who you came here to be. So, let's go through the themes of Saturn and Aries now. Very, very first theme, the very, very first energetic theme of Saturn in the sign of Aries is the real need to take ownership over your life. The need So, so this need to, the very, very first theme is taking ownership of your life. That's what it's all about. It's the ability to own your own life and your own well-being. So, being the leader, being the one who, initiates your own life. That's, really what it's about. So Aries wants to be the initiator. It wants to lead its own life. And it wants to be, the leader of its life. So, taking ownership over your life. How can you run your own life? Not letting anyone else make your own decisions for you, not letting anyone else walk on your toes, not letting anyone else, dictating you for how you want to live your life, how you want to assert yourself, the goals you want to go after, the things you want to take action on, really, really living a life that is true for you, is what Saturn and Aries wants. It's really what it wants, and it really is what it seeks, is being the co-creator of your life, really, really having empowered and being empowered to lead your life. And Aries wants to be empowered. We do have to acknowledge that about Aries. So leading your life is all important, all encompassing, with this. And then another really, really big thing is, Aries can act very, very impulsively and rashly without thinking before acting. That thinking of its actions, the consequences and the ramifications of its actions, before doing it. It just acts just on a whim, out of impulse, and doesn't think. It doesn't have the foresight to see, to understand, what might come out of these actions, what might come out of, me doing this and acting in these kind of ways. So that's really, really important to consider. It's really, really understanding that, with every action, everyone has freedom of speech, and everyone is, like that, but no one's free from the consequences. Understanding that is really, really important, because Saturn is, karma, what you put in, you get out. Input, output, what you reap is what you sow. You reap what you sow with Saturn. And so, for those individuals who were born between, I'm going to list the years out. I read this, so I'm going to list these years out. 1937 to 1940. I know that, my grandma was born in 1939. So she actually has Saturn exactly conjunct my natal sun sign at 16 degrees of Aries. So that's just, crazy. That's, our synastry with going on there. Anytime there is a rejection of focusing on yourself and being true to yourself, then it's probably something psychological, like something you were taught not to be this, and there's a insecurity here with not being allowed to go after what you want and be who you want. It's like, I don't want to be dragged down into your own, thing. It's like, nobody has to really spray their, insecurities about not being allowed to be themselves onto others and project this out onto other individuals without, doing the work within themselves to heal that and really live out the positive expression, the unapologetic being who you are with Saturn and Aries from a place of authenticity and truth rather than ego and bulldozing others. I'm not saying this person, really does this too much, but there are little hints of this in our interactions. But so anyway, the next time was 1967 through 1969. This, Mel Robbins and Celine Dion both have Aries North nodes and Aries, I believe both Aries moons, and Saturn and Aries. And so Mel Robbins' work is really about like Saturn puts a lesson on whatever it touches. So what does Mel Robbins do about pushing yourself, taking the leap, being successful, being confident in yourself, going after your goals with courage and self-assurance and self-love, and the 5-second rule with not procrastinating, taking action. All these things that she focused on are Aries-based topics, and it's Saturn Aries. So she has really, really done a lot of work to, master these Aries lessons with the North Node in Aries and Saturn in Aries. Both of those placements are really, really asking you to be authentic to who you are and to not be afraid to be authentic, in your life with who you want to be. And so those people who were born during these dates, again, 1996 through 1999, are going through this Saturn returns, and Saturn return is really a period of really, really looking at the lessons that you are struggling to learn in transition periods, rites of passage in your life, which asks you to really, really get serious about your life. Maybe they bring guilt about, like, oh, all these things that happened in the past. I wish that I acted on them then, and I didn't act on them now. And actually, really, really, it's like a reevaluation, like a pop quiz, like a checkpoint in your life, to like go to the principal's office and sit down and see, like, how are you doing in the school of life. It's like evaluation time. It's like you're taking a test in a class, like a severe life test. And the test which asks you the lessons of life is really the hardest test that exists out there. So that's really what that can be. And so people being affected by this Saturn and Aries transit that's going on right now and until 2028 are being asked to cultivate a lot of courage, a lot of bravery. They need to master their impulses. And, I say, just, acknowledge your impulses. Don't push down your impulses. Acknowledge them and allow them a seat at the table, but that you don't have to act on them. You don't have to act on these impulses. At best, Aries is not an impulsive energy. It's a sign that acts on its intuition with what feels right in the moment. Being true to who they are, not necessarily impulses. Because when you get in your impulses, you do things that are not true for you because you do things in the moment. They're raw, they're real, they're reactive. And they're just not gonna, it doesn't, like, in this world, you cannot be impulsive. You can, this 3D reality is not set up in a way where impulses is the order of the day. However, it is set up so that you can really, really follow what is true for you inside yourself and your intuition. That's how this reality is set up, and thank goodness it is, because if we act on our impulses, we would be doing all kinds of reckless, negative, unethical, and very, very dangerous things to ourselves, and it really, really wouldn't make us feel very, very good in our lives, and it wouldn't bring us true meaning and happiness and fulfillment. So, mastering our impulses so that we don't act on these impulses, that we act on our intuition instead. And, this drive to react, this real, drive to act is really what is getting looked at and put under the microscope at this time. So, and by the way, that video that, that I did for the 12 signs, the sound quality is lower on that video, so you may have to turn the volume up on that to be able to hear it, but I think you'll be able to hear it just fine. I'm not redoing that video. So, there's this drive to, react. The drive to, react really, really strongly to things that go on in your life. This we really, really need to consider, like, are we, responding as opposed to reacting? Because Aries doesn't have to live from the outside in, live from the inside out, from a sovereign, grounded, centered place inside of itself, and, just act from that truth and respond as opposed to just react just impulsively to things. It does not have to be like this and live like this. Trusting your instincts. Trusting your instincts with what feels right. That immediate gut feeling. Just your intuition, your gut, like all those things. That's what we're being invited to lean into. Not second guessing, not being indecisive like the opposite sign of Aries is Libra. And Libra is so indecisive. It gets caught in, all the other opinions and what the other person wants and what this person wants, what that person wants, and what you want. And it gets all in the mind with the logic and the ego and all that. And, it misses out on just the simple. Like Aries is a simple energy. I know what I want, and I'm acting on what feels true for me, and I'm going in that direction. Like that's Aries energy. And so can we really, really act on our instincts, in that way, with what we are deciding to do and put into our lives? Can we act on these instincts? Can we act on these feelings of what actually feels right? And so then Saturn rules over, responsibility. Rules over things like, what are you responsible for? What duties are you responsible for? Looks at maturing, maturing the energy. Saturn wants you to be mature, wants you to grow and evolve into this lifetime, to mature in this lifetime. Saturn is all about spiritual, emotional, psychological, maturity. Really, that's what Saturn is in astrology. And also looks at what is sustainable for the long term. What is sustainable for the long term? Are you building something that is, long term, long lasting, and can stand the test of time? Because Saturn wants something, long term and not short term. And it also looks at self-mastery, mastering, yourself. And really what self-mastery is really, really recognizing, being aware. Also is correlated to self-awareness, like recognizing your own thoughts, emotions, and impulses. And managing and putting the better expressions to all these things, rather than being controlled by all these things inside of you. So that's what it can be. And this is coming up right now, so I have to address it. Yeah, I won't go to the advisors again. There it'll be what it will be from now on. Depends on what I want to do. I don't have to have the anxiety doing this, continuing to do this. So whatever it is, the issue's gotten fixed. It's likely not to happen again. And so, yeah. And if I want to go to the advisors, then I'll allow myself to go to the advisors, but won't obligate myself to check, I'll do whatever feels right. If it means going to the advisors for help, then it does. If it means not, then yes, that's what I'll do. Do what feels right. When it comes to that, well, I won't go to them again. It is what it will be. If episodes don't get published, they'll get published, this kind of thing like that. Spotify fixes issues, so I want to reframe what I said. Because, if I am to live with the energy of doing these videos, then I have to be in a total state of freedom and relaxation. So, anyway, addressing that, let's continue. So, contradicted myself in this video. Sorry. I don't like to do that. But anyway. Um, I'm not going to go with them again. I'm just going to have that as, unless I really need to. I'm not going to go with them again unless I really need to. That's what I'll say. Well, I'm not going to go to them again. So anyway, it looks at, our insecurities and feelings, not being, when it comes to Saturn, really looks at, but I won't do what's not true for me when it comes to that. Saturn is doing what's true for you. So I won't go to them because it's not true for me, but if it should be true for me, then I'll allow myself to do that. So anyway, had to address that, for myself doing this. Looking at, insecurities. Saturn looks at the insecurities that we have with ourselves. All those insecurities. Saturn represents blocks and challenges in our lives. Saturn, wherever Saturn is in our charts, we feel limited, we feel restricted in this area of life. And, feelings, certain feelings of just feeling not good enough. Just we were duped, if that's even the word for it. We were challenged, we were set back, we were given a caveat or disadvantaged in a certain area of our lives, and we internalized certain messages that really, really wounded us and kept us small. Depends upon the Saturn house and sign that is in our chart. Our Saturn placement, our natal Saturn placement. Or challenges, because Saturn also represents challenges. That's what Saturn can also be, is challenges, obstacles. Represents what challenges that we have in our own lives to, to deal with that. So I don't have to go to them if I don't want to, but I will go to the advisors if I want to. I'll just make that a rule. Anyway, moving on. So challenges. Really, really, being in the state of challenge with what those things are, really. So Saturn rules over our challenges, our obstacles that get put in our path. So Saturn asks us to be patient. Saturn in Aries is about, delayed gratification as opposed to instant gratification. I believe I spoke about this on the video on my YouTube channel. And so instant gratification is like, Aries wants instant gratification. It wants it, right now. It wants the thing right now, instantly. It doesn't want to wait. Aries doesn't want to wait. And so Saturn is considered fall in the sign of Aries. Because if Saturn is so, slow, if Aries is so, patient, or so, impulsive, wants things right now, wants to act with courage and, assertiveness and be itself and, get things done right now, and kind of an immature energy. Saturn is like, no, hold the brakes. Be patient about this. Be methodical. Take one step at a time. Do all this, and then that's where it becomes challenging. Although there's many positive aspects of Saturn and Aries when you understand the nuance of it. But so Saturn in Aries asks us to be okay with delayed gratification. Be okay with waiting on things. Being okay with not getting things, right now in our lives. Not being able to get certain things, be able to have certain things, right now. But trusting that we'll get those things later on. Trusting that those things will come into our lives at a later point if we only put in the work to make those things a reality. And Saturn asks us to, put our blood, sweat, and tears of it, and to put our work into it, or effort into it, to co-create. our lives. Saturn asks for co-creation, asks us to step up to the plate and be, powerful in our lives, be responsible. So it asks us to really, really look at the importance of delayed gratification. To not enjoy your current circumstances, but to put current circumstances aside for something long-term. Some type of reward, some type of experience, some type of way of living that is long-term. That is, like if you're climbing up a mountain, you're not going to enjoy the probably process of climbing up the mountain, because it's really difficult. It takes many, many days. Your feet get tired. You get weak. It gets cold. You get tired of walking. You get exhausted. You get hopeless. Like, when am I ever going to get there? But if you keep Saturn proves that if you keep putting one step at a time, putting one foot in front of the other, to what you're doing, and you get to the top of that mountain, then you will achieve something greater, and it will be worth all that hard work that you put in to climb up the mountain. You'll go, now I finally made it to the top of the mountain. Now I finally feel accomplished and achieved and good about myself in that way, excellent about myself. So it wants to achieve excellence. So delayed gratification, because in our society, we're caught into instant gratification with social media and all these kind of things like that. And so it's getting out of that and becoming more mature to understand the importance of being patient, understand that things do not take overnight. And also, resilience is the next thing that I want to discuss. So the thing that I wanted to discuss about resilience, it reminds me of when I was in the hospital. Oh wow, that was tough. I couldn't eat solid food. I was feeling bloated. I had problems with my bowels, my constipation. And I grew from that experience that I had. Thank goodness I had my computer, and the cooking shows that I watched and the history shows get me by this really, really tough over 2 weeks, and I felt like I was never going to get out of the hospital. I've been through the ringer. It was rough. It was the worst, most difficult hospital experience I've ever had in my whole entire lifetime, from December 28th of 2025 through January 16th of 2026. And I had a reset for myself that I have in my really podcast, My Hospital Experience, My Great Reset. If you want to check that episode out, it's in there for you to see. I grew from that experience. I became stronger within myself, and through these very, very difficult experiences, difficult instances in our lives, and different times in our lives, we are more resilient. We become more resilient. We become stronger versions of who we really are. Not through, my body healed, all these kinds of things, and healed, wounds and, bodily issues or whatever. But, we became more resilient. We become more resilient through these very, very challenging circumstances to know that we can get through it. Because we got through it, we were strong enough, and we developed enough strength and courage and, and toughness and tenacity and perseverance and endurance to get through that. So can we develop more resilience? If anything tough comes up, and we, Saturn Aries gives us the resilience to push through and take responsibility for our lives. I think I've already made that very, very evident, is taking responsibility for your life, being accountable for that. Now let's go back and discuss Saturn and Pisces. Oh wow, this was a tough time in my life. The summer of 2023, when Saturn was in Pisces, and the summer of 2024, especially July 2024, was brutal for me because I was in my depression. I was in regret. I was in obsessive compulsive disorder. I was in anxiety. Saturn in Pisces, at worst, can be really feeling like there's no hope. Feeling like you're hopeless. You're not powerful at all. You have to surrender to whatever goes on in your life because you're not powerful. And it can fall into depression, self-deception, fall into sorrow, not being able to separate the realistic life from the imagination, your boundaries being not strong, but being open, and not being able to have power in grounding and footing. So boundaries was a really, really big thing with Saturn and Pisces. And also being a victim. Being a victim. Really, really going through a rough harm or any kind of loss. From something. It's really feeling like you're hopeless, you're helpless, you have no power, you can't have control over your own life, you can't change and co-create your reality, that you can't that you can't create your own reality, that you can't change your circumstances, all those kind of things like that. So yeah, that's what it can be. That's a shadow of Pisces and Pisces South Node. So there's a lot of overlap with Saturn and Pisces South Node. And I'll talk about Saturn and Pisces in the birth chart sometime. But so I have Saturn and Aries in the birth chart on my YouTube channel in this podcast. If you want to go back and check that episode out that I did on April 19th, I do believe. So, being a victim, taking responsibility for our lives, being about the dreams that we want to develop, crystallizing these dreams, making these dreams a reality, and looking at escapism, where we escaped into the other worlds, into our books, into our movies, into our whatever, in order to avoid this painful reality. That's what it can really, really be about. Where we are, escaping the real reality of what is going on, really. We're escaping our present circumstances. And not facing what they are, instead of integrating the spiritual into the practical, where we're not facing reality. Caught in extremism. We're caught in extremism. And that's a Pisces shadow. It's extremism. Yeah. So, taking things to extremes, that's something that I just wanted to mention. That was in Jen Spiller's book. And other Pisces shadows. So, we really, really looked at during that time, we looked at, during those from March 7th, 2023 through, really February 12th of 2026, we looked at our relationship to the divine or higher power spirituality. we learned to bring spiritual practices down into the material, to have a spiritual discipline, to really, really ground our spiritual practices and be disciplined about spirituality. Really, really, being of service with healthy boundaries. With healthy boundaries. Being of helpful service to others. And so now we're moving into Saturn and Aries. So let's discuss this a little bit more in depth. The Aries, is impulsive. It acts without thinking it through. It tends to start new things. And Aries is the starter. It just starts all these things. It starts all these, initiatives. And it initiates new goals, new plans with the new visions that it has. And it takes paths that we typically, don't take. Takes new paths. It's a trailblazer. It wants to do what's never been done before. It wants to be courageous. It wants to be the first. It wants to stand out. It wants to be bold. And it wants to individuate itself from others. It wants to be an individual. It wants to assert itself in the world. It's very, very assertive as a sign. Aries is known for being that. I certainly am that way because I am an Aries sun. So, it can act, we're learning here to act with more purpose and intentionality, being more intentional, really thinking through and being very deliberate in our actions. We're mastering our impulses and our instincts in that way. We may have difficulty, where we were working on expressing our anger fully, allowing ourselves to express our anger. In a mindful way, not in a reactive way, to express our anger in the right settings, in the right places, to the right people, in the right way. And that's what we're learning, to channel the emotion of anger in, not suppressing the emotions, not suppressing who you are, not suppressing how you're feeling, but channeling it in a constructive, mature sort of fashion is what we're learning. So, but in letting it out of its cage, really. So, asserting ourselves, really, asserting who we are, really, asserting our own individual selves in our lives, asserting what we want, asserting what we need, acting on our desires, acting on every, desire that we have for ourselves. Acting on all these desires that we have, really. So, what desires do we have? What real desires are, inside of us that we just want to act upon, that we don't want to push down or keep quiet. Like the lower Aries energy, one of the Aries cannot sit on energy. It needs to constantly move its chi, move its energy. And so you want to act on those desires. How can you embody those desires and manifest those into your reality of what true desires you have for yourself? And then developing courage, really developing the courage to to be your bold, authentic self, and claim who you are in the world. That darn it, you have a right to be here. You have a right to be. It's not a privilege. Aries says you have a right to be here. You have a right to exist. You have a right to go after what you want. You have a right to live the life that you want to live. That's what Aries says. Saturn in Aries can be about inner authority. Following our inner authority as opposed to relying on the external authority telling us what to do and how to live our lives. Having personal sovereignty and autonomy over our own lives. Following our own inner compass. And building self-confidence. It's really key with Saturn in Aries. Is building up that confidence. It's like a muscle. How we, Saturn, when it says, self-confidence is a muscle, and you go to the gym, you're sort of flabby at first, but the more you work out, the stronger that muscle gets. So building up self-confidence in yourself to be able to confidently make decisions and act in your life is a commitment to, to persevere. And can our goals be long-lasting? Can we commit? Can we follow through with what we want to achieve? And we're looking at where we are immature also. Looking at where we are immature, where the primal lower qualities, lower expressions of Aries, we are really, really immature in that way, or we are really egoic. Really, really egoic, and reactive. That's really what it can be. And where we are reactive, where we can be in our egos. Aries is a separation principle. Mars is a separation principle. The Aries, I'm an individual, you're separate from me. Pisces says the sign that comes before, like, we're all interconnected, we're all one. So it can be reactive, very, very, reactive in a way where we are, not responding to certain things, but just something comes at us and we just have an immediate reaction, immediate, real and raw reaction without thinking about it, without processing, without reviewing it, without reflecting on it. So we have the wrong use of willpower that we have inside of us that goes on with our certain willpower. Really, this is what it can be, is using our willpower in really the wrong ways, and really channeling our willpower in really positive ways, like really beneficial ways for us in our own lifetimes. So can we be courageous? Can we be strong? Can we be assertive in how we channel our will? How we focus our will and force? And really looking at the leaders who are not sovereign, who are not authentic, who are not operating from a soul-centered place, who are not showing integrity. We're not showing integrity in their leadership style. Not being true to principles, not being for the good of all, not being selfless but true to yourself, not being, not doing what is right to do, not doing what feels right. We want to move into the higher expressions of the sign of Aries as opposed to getting caught in the shadow. And so with this, we want to look at how can we respond maturely in conflict. How can we fight against, this person's, what they have going on over here, and not let us steer us off course? How can we manage our anger and emotions in conflict so that we can be assertive and willing to show up for that conflict, but we don't need to take somebody down and control and be aggressive as opposed to assertive. Really understanding the difference between being aggressive as opposed to assertive is really important. And expressing anger and going after what we want is really huge. Like we have, Saturn Aries shouts at you and screams at you and wants you to go after what you want in this life and start new things, start new ventures. That's what it wants. For you in your life, is for you to start new things, and reconnecting us with our instincts and our desires. Really, that's what it's about. We're looking at how can we deeply connect to our to those parts of us. Can we stay focused on our long-term goals? Can we stay focused? Can we stay the course? Can we not, like when, because, it's like the fire constantly needs wood to put on that fire, in order to have the fire going, you constantly need to feed it with more wood or whatever. Otherwise, the fire is just going to die out. You have to constantly keep feeding the energy and keep feeding that momentum by putting more into it. So Saturn requires you to put in the work. And, can we stick it out? Can we commit instead of, oh, I'm so fascinated, I'm so, stimulated with this and so driven to this, but then it dies out and then I lose interest in whatever. Can we hold our attention? Can we hold our focus? Where are we putting our focus? Are we putting our focus, or are we feeding what we want to feed? Are we, like Pam Gregory was talking about in a video that I was watching last night, how do we hold our focus? How do we hold our attention? Holding that attention towards something that we want to achieve. Aries is great at starting things, but not the best at following through them. Aries is not known exactly for following through and committing exactly to things, but we want to follow through with all these things. And so Saturn is asking Aries to really, really get disciplined during this time, to develop a stronger sense of maturity and commitment, and being focused, and using your will and using your energy at the higher level, and have a plan and strategize and put in the hard work. That's what Saturn is sort of demanding of Aries during this time, and Saturn's going to be on my sun here next year. So I wonder what that will be like, but I have been really activated by Saturn Aries. Like Saturn Aries, I've been so disciplined. Like every day I wake up and I commit to doing these podcast episodes, and this is what I want for myself in the long term, and I will eventually monetize for this content. This is my passion. This is what I most enjoy doing. And I will do it, and I've been very, very disciplined and committed to sticking to this, and I will stick to this. I do not want to give up on this and leave my channel stagnant. So it's about taking ownership for your actions, really, really taking ownership and accountability for your actions. And can we be self-reliant? Can we be not relying on others for how we want to run and operate our lives? Can we rely on them to not rely on them so much as relying on ourselves? Really, when it comes down to it. Really, can we be self-sustainable and self-sufficient when it comes to relying on ourselves in our lives? And there's a difference between being empowered to rely on ourselves versus being overwhelmed, scared, not knowing what to do, not feeling empowered, feeling helpless, feeling hopeless. And that comes from being thrown out into the world, having to do it all on your own, having to go to this different places and do it all on your own, and go to this different place and do all this stuff. Like it's not that. But looking at what really disempowers you in that kind of way, what brings you to a state of disempowerment in your life. It's about being self-directed as you become a better, more evolved version of who you truly are. Being that better version of yourself. How can you be the best version of yourself? Being a leader in your own life. How can you lead your own life? Take responsibility for what you do. And be solid. Being solid, being steadfast, and achieving what your soul wants and what you really authentically want within yourself in your own life. So how can we, be really, really dedicated to that completely? So what are you devoted to? Really, really asking yourself and really, really devoting your time, energy, and attention to, to what is true for you. And that's what, Saturn Aries wants for you. So that is the collective overview for Saturn in Aries in the birth chart. Go back and see that video for Saturn and Aries for the 12 signs. The information is not exactly in sync with the information in this video, but it's still very, very good. And I will not destroy the integrity because it is an episode in this podcast, so I will not redo it. You can go back and check that episode out. Tomorrow, I will be back in the morning. I won't be Thursday because, I have a medical thing that my mom has, and so Tomorrow I'll be talking about Mars in the sign of Gemini, which I have in my natal birth chart, what that means in the birth chart. And I can't wait to talk about that. So tune in for tomorrow's episode. And anyway, bye for now, everyone. I will see you on the next episode of the Cosmic Sky Podcast. And happy Saturn, Aries, and happy good year ahead. So, bye for now.